Hey everybody, again, this is the Theotek Podcast. We've been on a bit of a hiatus due to technical reasons last week, and 2 weeks ago we were all just too busy, but we're glad to come at you live this morning on Friday morning, as we always do at 9 o'clock, with the Theotek Podcast, talking church technology, how to use it to build the kingdom of God and make disciples of all nations. And this morning, of course, I'm joined with our regulars, Wes Allen. Hey Wes, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. And Wes was one of those who couldn't be with us a couple of weeks ago, and then he tried to bear with us last week when I couldn't get my Wi-Fi going the right way. And I'm wired today. I've got a wired connection, and I actually got a new Wi-Fi thing for our office. These things are awesome. If any of you are interested in one of these, those things.
Ooh, the little. How much was that?
Well, I got it used on Amazon for $45. They're normally like $70 each, which they're not bad. But these things have a range like you wouldn't believe. So anyway, that's an awesome product. I actually had it sitting here so I could recommend it to you. But,
cool.
We also have Antoine, Wright, the curator of Mobile Ministry Magazine, and he's having some Wi-Fi issues himself, it looks like, and so his video's not here, but we've got his audio, which that's probably better anyway, so we don't have to actually look at him. So
that was just mean.
Antoine, how's it going, man? He's muted. I don't know if he knows he's muted, but he might have been muted himself on purpose.
Yeah. Well, I muted myself because I have some coffee brewing, and I know how some guys complain about my coffee brewing moments on Theotek here. So
Eating with Antoine. That's the alternate name of the podcast.
So yeah. But yeah, doing all right. Finally getting some sleep. I've driven about 3,000 miles in the last 2.5 weeks, so I'm a little tired.
Yeah, when did you get back from going up towards Wes's direction?
I was up there for about 9 days, 8 or 9 days, and I literally got back to Charlotte and didn't stop moving. I've been in Charlotte, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem every day this week. So
sorry we could not connect, Antoine.
No, it was my fault. I got too tired, and there's a whole matter of a car inspection that I had to do.
Yeah. Well, we still need you to come up Hickory Way sometime soon. Well, there, in between Antoine and Wes, you'll see Steve Hewitt. Those of you who are followers of my writing at Christian Computing Magazine will probably readily recognize Steve, and he is the editor. You're not actually the editor officially anymore, right? You're more of the publisher.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the best term.
Okay, Christian Computing Magazine and their newest publication, which I don't write for, but I always enjoy reading, is the American Church Magazine. They've been going for a couple of years now. Thank you for coming and joining us this morning, Steve. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Delighted to be here.
Good. One of the interesting projects he's working on, we were talking about when he first got on with us before the show, is he's setting up a sort of a retreat center for pastors and their wives out there in Kansas City area, and I'm interested in that. I'd like to come out and see that once you get things coming and going.
That'd be great. That's one of the reasons, we started the American Church Magazine, and the Pastor Retreat Center is sort of a spin-off of that, because Group Publishing has done a summit 3 years in a row, and I've spoken at all three on the future of the church in America. And as we were discussing this thing and that thing and how churches are evolving, I mean, the largest church startups these days are simulcast churches or churches under 50. And, the fact of the matter is the church is declining in America. The last year I spoke, we had a great guy at our table all 3 days, dynamic pastor, but he was, I shouldn't say that, he's a regular guy, and he was 58 years old. And he began to cry at our table because he's like, I've given my whole life to be a pastor, and I know that I'm not ever going to be asked to simulcast my sermons to other churches. I know that, my church is in decline. And I just felt for him so much that we decided to build a pastor retreat center just so I could invite guys like that to come spend 3 days with us, 3 days, 2 nights, eat our food, and sit and listen to their stories, hold their hands when they cry, and try to give them some inspiration to get back out there and get into work. So that's where that came from.
What's the time frame? When do you hope you'll have that up and running?
There's a couple of deals in the works. It'll probably be next year.
Okay.
We bought 30 acres of very, very primitive timber I mean, there was a dirt road that ran a quarter of a mile back to a small meadow, which we've had to expand, and the dirt road was in pretty bad shape. We couldn't even drive it with a four-wheel drive Toyota Tundra at first. We repaired it a little bit, then we had electricity put in, which was about $12,000, and they had to drill it right down the road. So now the road's kind of gone again. So we got the retaining walls, and just, next thing is to build the building and get the water back there. So we're getting there.
Cool. That sounds awesome. Well, Steve is the publisher, or whatever you want to call it, for Christian Computing Magazine, which I've been writing for. I can't even remember when I started.
I was trying to remember that too. How long has it been?
Well, I remember this. I sent you an email saying, I wish you had more of this. And you said, good, why don't you write it for us? And I went, there's no way I could write for that. And, and then I thought about it, and I prayed about it, and I said, yeah, I'll do that. So that's actually you kind of gave me my start in this side writing ministry that I've been doing for, I bet it's close to 13, 14 years now.
That's what I was thinking. It was that long at least, too. And people should know that all of our writers, like Kevin, write for free. We don't pay any of our writers. We have Russ McGuire, who's Vice President of Strategies for Sprint, who writes for us every month, and he really can't even say that about, he's not supposed to really brag about his position at Sprint, but we've got a lot of really influential people that write for us, and they all do it for free. It's just out of their heart and ministry. And CCMag, the subscriptions are free. We obviously got to make money to stay in business, so we have advertisements, but basically we try just to make enough to get by, and done it for 27 years now.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's given me an opportunity to, do some things and see some things, and of course, Bible software companies, give me Bible software. I've been compensated well, even though you haven't ever been the one to do so through Christian Computing Magazine, but it's just been a joy and a blessing to be able to do so, and so I appreciate the opportunity. I'm showing our website on the screen now. If you can see that, I think you should be able to. And this is where you go. CCMag.com leads to this complicated long website up here, but just go to CCMag.com and check it out. You can always read it in PDF format or more of a dynamic format, and there you see the big subscribe button there. And so I recommend everybody go get it. It's free, of course, and it's got some really great content. I remember when I first read it, it was a subscription basis, and I don't know, what did you charge, like $15 a year or $20 a year? Or,
yeah, that's back when it was probably in print.
It was print back then, and it was right after you went to the digital format that I sent you that email. So it's however long you've probably been doing the digital format. That's subtract maybe 6 months, and that's probably how long I've been writing with it. But anyway, so go check that out. He's got some good stuff. And this, are you really ready for 2015? What were you saying in that article? We were talking about that before, and it still chilled down my spine as we got into it.
I've been a techno evangelist for 27 years. People are concerned about security. My viewpoint's always been, so what? There's 10 million antelope on one side, and they've got to get across the river. And yeah, there's 5 crocodiles there, but most of us are going to make it. And there's some damage that has to go. But by far, don't be afraid of technology due to security issues. Even Y2K, when that went out, I was spending all of 98 and 99 trying to tell people that Y2K was not going to be an issue. I was a hostile guest on the Focus on the Family show. That's exactly what Dobson said, because he believed Y2K was going to be the end of the world. Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, and James Kennedy, all of those guys, interviewed me, and they all had video series on this is going to be the end of the world. So I've been known for always being the guy that says, look, don't worry about stuff. That's the first article I said, it's time to worry. And here's why. You don't have to worry about your stuff. You don't have to worry about your computer going down. That's always a concern. And more hacking and cloud and all that kind of stuff more than ever. But the number of hacks, cyber warfare that took place in 2014 compared to 2013 was well over 10 times the amount. I don't think you could name a company in 2015 that wasn't hit. Target and Home Depot and Forbes, Dairy Queen, and I list them all in that article. It's just absolutely amazing, everybody who's been hit. And the interesting thing is, we've all 68% of us, 64% have been issued new debit cards because accounts have been constantly compromised. But here's the interesting stuff, and I followed this carefully. Nobody has taken advantage really of that information. So when Home Depot got hit, it wasn't like a lot of people got hit in their accounts. It was like somebody's hacked it, but not doing anything with the information. And if you get down to the people who are trying to figure out, like everybody's trying to figure out who Sony got hit by. Was it really North Korea? Was it China? Was it us? I don't. When it boils down to it, it's very hard to track. But a lot of the people that do the tracking believe this last year in 2014, like Home Depot and Forbes, they were hit by Russia. They were hit by Russia and China that are just experimenting to see, how much they can hack and how much they break in. And it is amazing. You can almost get into anything, and you can almost hack anything, and you can take it down. So what's going to happen if a major bank is down for 3 days, and a lot of your congregation can't really access their ATMs? They can no longer buy gas. They can't get to the grocery store. And I was reminded of that because in Harrisonville, Missouri, South Kansas City, where I'm living now, I saw people coming into our grocery store, the Price Chopper, and they were being told quietly that that card that they had could no longer be used. I don't know what bank it was, but that bank was down because it had been hacked. And they were just simply told, I'm sorry, you can't buy groceries. Do you have another card? Do you have any cash? And these people were amazed. They're like, that's impossible, But it was possible for several days. And that's happened to me one time with Bank of America. I was simply not able to use my cards and do anything because they were that was many years ago, actually. But that sort of stuff's on the increase in a big way. Since the article was written 3 weeks ago, look what's happened. Facebook and Instagram were both taken down for 1 hour. And they were both taken down at the same time. They're two totally separate companies. Now, neither one of those companies have yet said why they were off the air for an hour. Nobody wants to, I start to sound like a conspiracy theorist. I realize that. But these things happen and nobody says, well, this is why. And we all know that 80 million Americans in the last couple of weeks have had all their Blue Cross and Blue Shield information, their Social Security, all their health records have been hacked and stolen. Who would do that and why? I think you're never going to hear. Nobody took advantage of that situation. I think, once again, it's outside cyber terrorism coming in. And really scary was, and this, I only found it because one of my readers sent me a link after that article. But it never made the big news. But in the last 3 weeks, the FBI arrested 3 Russians in New York who were here with the sole intent of taking down the stock market. They were going to hack the stock market because all the electronic trading, and it would actually have destroyed. I mean, all of a sudden, stock that was worth 10 cents would have been worth 50 cents. Stocks that were worth $20 would have gone down to $1. People would have gone buying and selling. It would have been a mess, and all the information would have actually been false. And it'd be like, I don't know, that no one was really sure how you could even recover from that, how you could pull back and exchange everything. Now, luckily, they were caught. But they were from Russia here in America seeking to take down our stock exchange. So I guess that article is about churches and their disaster relief programs. Are they ready? They may be ready for tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, whatever's in their area. But are they really ready? And I don't even know how to get ready, to tell you the truth. How do you get ready for maybe ATMs or the internet being down 3 days? But I know here, actually, if you think about it, the internet was down in 3 days in Kansas City. People will be shooting each other in the street because there's no way to get money, no way to get gas, no way to get food, no way to communicate. I mean, when you think about how dependent we've become on this technology, it's a little scary.
I think you're right. Antoine, I think you might have an interesting perspective on that. What do you think? Are we in trouble, or?
I'm with Steve. I'm actually with Steve in this, man. And over the years, having been a fan of Steve and CCMag, we tend to agree more than we disagree, prospectively. And this is definitely one of those spaces where we definitely agree. And I think in some respects, there's 2 parts to this. There's one part that we have this healthy/unhealthy reliance on the type of services that as churches we don't control, or even as individuals, we have very little idea of what goes on behind the Wizard of Oz's magic mirror. So
Yeah.
we get Facebook some connectivity information.
think maybe we lost him there.
Yeah, I was going to say I lost him.
I got, Steve, it's interesting the way that you're talking, because you think of flashbacks, and I kind of grew up at the end tail of this, but you had the flashbacks of all the nuclear preparations and the whole establishment of that insane acronym, mutually assured destruction, and where previously we were worried about a physical destruction. I think in this era, because the Steve was bringing up correctly, we had the Russians who were in New York who got arrested, and you have North Korea maybe Sony hacking themselves for a publicity stunt, which I think is far more likely. And but you have all these things going on. But we also need to understand is we're doing the exact same thing to all these other these other groups, and all these tests and all these things that are out there. I think they're signals to folks going, we can pretty much just end Western civilization rather quickly if we really wanted to, without firing a shot or launching a missile or doing anything. Yeah. All you have to do is bring large segments of this infrastructure down, and we're in trouble. And that's where I find the whole concept kind of partially terrifying and partially fascinating. That human beings seem to need to recognize that we're able to destroy one another in order to come to any kind of equilibrium, which is insane in a very large way.
Well, Homeland Security and everything is said, look, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. We've done it. I mean, somebody inserted a virus into the centrifuges in Iran. Yeah. I mean, somebody did that. And China says we've hacked into them a lot, and therefore they feel justified to hack back. But our president then made a comment last year in 2014 that if you cyber attack America, it is the same as a physical attack on our shores, and we will treat it as such.
So it's like we took down North Korea's internet connection.
Yeah. And somebody took down South Korea. Someone took South Korea down for a full day. And I'm just trying to imagine what your community would be like if that happened for 3 days. It would be, people need milk, people need food.
What was that TV show that came on during the summertime where all the electricity in the world went out? My wife watched it.
Revolution.
Revolution,
collagen implants still work though.
Right, but imagine if someone hacked our power grid, and was able to bring it down for 3 days. Sure, they'd probably get it back up, quicker than that thing. That was a ridiculous scenario, but maybe not as ridiculous as we think. I don't know.
No,
there's actually there's a TV show out right now that's actually exploring this line of topic. It's called Person of Interest, CBS show. I love that show actually. They started with a really interesting premise of a guy who just wanted to build a computer system that learned how to spot non-violent and violent events before they happened, and it just so happened that ego got in the way. The word tells us that pride comes before the fall, but somebody else got their hands on the schematics and built a system that basically built a personality that wants to experiment with how we have used the internet and its associated services to connect with one another. And it's a really interesting, it's a very weird modern day window into why and how we've allowed certain types of connectivity or allowances, whether that be policy allowances or technology allowances, to govern our lives where we might not have the control that we would like to have. And I personally believe that it's a discussion that the church is more often than not too far removed from. Some churches, or at least some parts of the body, kind of believe that technology is just that thing that you do on the side to keep the service running, to keep people interested in who you are, rather than, the God opinion is a relevant and needed opinion when we're talking about how do we design technology behaviors or technology services that serve the good of all persons. It's really interesting, and at least a part of conversations I get involved in.
And Kevin, you mentioned the grid and that, it could go down or it could probably be back up. In that article, I was surprised to discover, and I actually went to people in the military to confirm it. In 2009, all of our military bases have their own electrical grid because they expect the grid could be hacked and the grid could go down, and at least our military bases will continue to have electricity. So they're prepared for the fact that our grid is very susceptible. And talking to a guy who was Airman of the Year 2 years in a row for the Air Force and used to actually fly high-tech equipment and spy on China for us, he said the scenario in L.A., for example, if you took the grid down in scenario, and it actually in L.A. and it went down, it's not something you can flip back on. It wouldn't be days, it wouldn't be weeks, it wouldn't even be months. It would be years to restore if it was hacked. Not that it went down like a transformer blew, but if it was a cascading effect and it was hacked, to get the code and to get everything back, it would be years to get LA's electricity back on. And the government's actually prepared for that. That's why the military bases all have their own electrical grid and their own electrical sources. That's a little scary.
And I do want to point out, because I don't want to freak.
Going back to this thing of Y2K thing that we talked about a minute ago, the Christian leaders were all so alarmist, saying, we got to get ready, stockpile canned goods and all this.
Kevin, that's because they're looking forward to the end of the world.
But why do you think But why do you think that they're so resistant now? Is it they don't know there's a problem, or they're gun shy? We really messed up last time. We don't want to look stupid again.
They don't understand it, Kevin.
I think it's a lot of that. Well, also,
I don't think they understand it.
Okay.
They don't, like what Antoine said. We don't know what goes on behind the curtain. And so, because it's not, and really all the people that we rely on as the Christian leaders, they're getting their information from mass media, which really doesn't understand technology.
Right.
And nobody's talking about this stuff because, frankly, they don't get it. And so they don't have anything to talk about. And so they're just kind of lost, and we don't hear it. They're more worried about, their social issues and things like that.
Yeah.
And the way we communicate. The way we communicate and publish information has changed since 1998, 1999. Michael Hyatt, who's now the head of Thomas Nelson Publishing, wrote the book Y2K Countdown to Armageddon. Then he took it to Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, James Kennedy, James Dobson, who all published their books through him and said, this is the book I'm pushing. This is real. All of those guys read that book, and all of them came out with a 3-part video series on Y2K, the Countdown to Armageddon. It was all just built up. Most of those guys are gone now, so you can actually, there's stuff I knew. Hank Hanegraaff, the guy that's the Bible Answer Man, I was on his show, and he talked about the fact he played me clips from their videos. And all 4 videos, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, and I had Jerry Falwell's cell phone at the time because the Wall Street Journal did an article about the whole deal, and all 4 of those guys in their video series, if you could ever get a copy of them now, all of them say, as they presented it to their church, last night my wife said to me, honey, won't Bill Gates just solve this problem? Now, all 4 of them said that the night before their sermon series, and it was like on page 77 of Michael Hyatt's book, that Michael Hyatt's wife said, honey, don't you just think Bill Gates will solve this? And it was just really, they all took that book and made a play. No one's writing a book about this. And no one would read it if I wrote it. And, no one now wants to. I think you're right. Everybody's gun shy. When that was all over with, everybody just went quiet. I mean, Y2K was, it was huge. There was a guy that really was the one that began to blow the whistle back up in Canada, non-Christian, in 1988, because he thought it was a concern. And his idea was to raise concern so that people would fix the problem, and which people did. By the time it got there, it wasn't ever an issue. He was surprised. He goes, why is it the Christians, I'm trying to think of the exact quote, because he called me in 2000. He goes, I thought Christians would be the people of light. Instead, they were the leaders of fear and darkness. And that was a non-Christian's view of this. And toward the end, when he was invited to conferences, Christian conferences, he was trying to tell them, hey, it's okay now. And they're like, no, don't say that. We want you to continue.
That doesn't sell books and video series.
And Wes, like you're exactly right. They really wanted the end of the world. Do you remember a guy named Larry Burkett?
Yeah.
But Larry's passed away, died of cancer. Larry in 1999, when even James Dobson had to start admitting that it looked like it was going to be okay, Larry Burkett made this comment I found to be fascinating. He said, well, I'll tell you the truth. I pray daily for an economic disaster to strike America in order to bring them back to God. And there is some people.
Steve, the Y2K thing was the beginning of my walk away from evangelicalism.
Yeah.
And was exactly what the gentleman said. It was because I expected Christians to be people of light, and all they were shouters of darkness. They didn't
hold the people accountable that spread that fear.
Yep.
And we were very involved with this. I was on the cover of Wall Street Journal because I was techno-evangelist that was saying it wasn't going to be a big deal. And gosh, there was times I spoke 7 times a day, breakfasts and radio shows and churches, and traveled everywhere, trying to calm people down. We still can very conservatively estimate that 250,000 American Christian homes made decisions that they would never financially recover from. Mm-hmm. And that just kind of got swept under the carpet. I mean, people, the stories I could tell you, people who just, I remember a lady walked up to me in Little Rock, Arkansas after I did a presentation on why Y2K was just going to be a bump in the road, and she handed me 87 crumpled dollar bills. And I'm like, ma'am, what's this for? And she goes, I want you to have it because I was saving up $92 in order to buy a pump shotgun, because there was actually a Christian publication that said you had to have a pump shotgun so when they came for your food and your children, you could pump the shotgun. And she goes, I'm a single mother with 3 kids, and I duct tape my children's shoes together every morning because we can't afford tennis shoes. And I've probably spent so far $1,000 on Y2 preparations. I gave her the $88, told her to go buy shoes for her kids.
Amen.
That sort of stuff happened across America, and nobody talked about it when it was all over with.
Well, Steve, I think
let me ask.
Talking about your, you're now trying to do more than just church technology in American Church Magazine, and talking about the status of the church, and all of us are in church. We love the church. I pastor a church. But, all of us know or are in churches either plateaued or in decline. And I think a lot of it has to do with this kind of thing. That we are seen as, all of the church is either irrelevant, ignorant, or rude and mean-spirited. And so you're trying to maybe sort of set the church back on a new path with American Church Magazine. Tell us about that. What are you doing there?
The goal was to really encourage pastors, and there's nothing wrong. For example, first of all, everybody's trying to tell you, all these blogs and everything's out there, it's like, do these 7 things, do these 5 things, do these 3 things, do these, in order to grow your church. Got to grow. And I'm trying to tell you, look, it's really okay to pastor a declining or stagnant church. There's nothing wrong with that. The best example I get is I love war movies. I loved A Bridge Too Far. And at the end of A Bridge Too Far, when the British had to pull out, they left hundreds and hundreds of soldiers who were wounded and couldn't leave. All the chaplains volunteered to stay with those guys. Now, they could walk out with the troops, but they volunteered to stay because that was their congregation at that time. They knew they were going to go to a prisoner of war camp. None of them were ever invited to write books or speak at the next convention of their denomination. Nobody saw, but they knew that was their congregation because God gave it to them, and they all stayed. And so a lot of guys like, man, everybody in my church is old, and they're 60s or 70s. We got churches, the average age is 73, 75. That's the average age of their membership. We know churches that have a full-time pastor. I know one right here close. He's a full-time pastor of a small Christian church, a Southern Baptist. He knows when he decides to retire, and he's 60. I turned 60, he's my age. When he finally decides to retire, that church has already made the decision to close their doors. They're not going to continue because they're all his age or older. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing really wrong with that. Minister to the congregation you have. So we've been trying to encourage churches, trying to give them some ideas. But when we try to give them too many ideas, some of them get discouraged, and I know that. And the goal is not to discourage the churches. I started this series in the magazine, and I don't know where to go with it, on why the church really is in decline, and Y2K would be one chapter. I mean, I remember speaking at Willow Creek, there was a doctor and his wife that came to a breakfast I spoke at. They'd heard me on Dobson and thought I was one of the guys that thought it was going to be a bad deal. And they had a breakfast, and he was at my table. He's like, yeah, we've decided not to have kids, and we've done all these things. And I said, well, you need to hear what I'm going to say, and I'd be interested to hear what you think afterwards. So he stayed afterwards. And he said, you know what? I realize now I've been a fool, and I'm going to start picking up my life and continuing. But I'll tell you one thing, I will never, ever again trust a Christian leader. And that impact has, that was a big chunk we took. The other one is I did write on this one in the American church, was the 70s and the eschatology, the whole last day stuff. I mean, we grew up with, the song, I wish we'd all been ready, a bag of gold will buy a loaf of bread. And really, I happen to still, I'm of that, I believe there could be a rapture. I believe Christ could come back. But we way overdid it in the 70s. And you can't believe the horror stories I actually got from writing that article in American Church. One lady told me, I to this day, she's in her, 70s. I never finished high school because my pastor told me there was no need to finish high school.
Oh my gosh!
Because after all, Y2K was going to happen. Adam Hamilton, who's pastor now of the largest United Methodist Church in America, tells the story. He was at Assembly of God Church when he was a young man, and people run off and got married because every Sunday it was like, well, we'll see you next week unless the Lord comes, and it was so driven in that every sign was going to be, it's going to happen right away. Young people were getting married to people they didn't even know just because they wanted to be able to get married before he came. I mean, decisions were made that now there's a lot of adults, my 60s, and that are saying, I don't care, I don't want to go. You burned me once, you're not going to burn me twice. So we made a lot of mistakes like that in the, since the 60s and 70s when the church began to decline, which was in the 70s.
That's sad just to think about. That ministerial malpractice is what I call that. When it's the influence and the ministry of the church that actually does the harm. There was a book title, I never read the book, but the book title itself was amazing. When the church abuses its members or something like that, about 20 years ago. And I didn't read the book. I probably should have, but I've felt that myself. I felt abused as a pastor and as a member. And I'm sure that there are people who are just not motivated to continue, like you said, because of things like this. It's very sad.
I think, Kevin, the problem with the American church is that's quintessentially American. And one of the great things about the problem with the American church is that it's quintessentially American. And Americans are just, we pride ourselves on short-term gain. And look, you see what's going on in our government right now with the different parties, and they will mortgage years of the future to win an election, and our churches function this way. So you saw it a little bit after 9/11, right? We hype up things so hugely, and when it does, because we think, well, that'll get 14 people to come into the church, and then when everything doesn't happen that way, then we talk again. And they're just like, why am I listening to you? There's a great Simpsons episode where I'm trying to forget what had Lisa becomes a Buddhist or something, but Homer does something that's terrible, and Marge looks at him and goes, "This is the most awful thing you've ever done." He goes, "You've said that to me so many times it's lost all meaning." And I think that's what people hear from us. We keep harping on these things, and when the world doesn't end and the society doesn't collapse and everything goes on, they're like, why do I bother listening to you? You're a bunch of idiots. Yeah. And we've earned that, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And, of course, these are just a few. I mean, if you've ever read the book Bowling Alone, that helps you understand a lot of reasons why. I mean, bowling alleys would have all gone down, too, because back in the 70s, they were all about leagues. And leagues are not in anymore. People want to bowl alone, and so they've evolved to psychedelic bowling night, with fogged lanes and lights. And you can't even bowl a good game, but that's what the people wanted. So they sort of evolved. And PTA, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Awanas, not Awanas, but the Shriners, the Masonic Lodge, they're all down to 25% of what they used to be in the 70s. So part of this also isn't even like a unique church phenomena. It's part of the fact the way our society's changed. And a lot of that's the way we communicate. We like personal communication now. So I think it's very important churches do mobile apps, do something where they can connect each other. That's a whole big part of church, church management software now, is can you connect your people together? Can they access? We were talking earlier before the show about Facebook. Can you access and get questions answered and stuff? But I'm throwing so much stuff in here. There's some stuff we can't even fix. All pastors are paying for the fact that we're living in a quick news cycle. So CNN reports that a pastor comes out, he has AIDS, and he's infected most of his congregation, which happened like 2 months ago. All of us take a hit for that. I think back in the 70s, that would have been a regional or local story, but now it hits everywhere. So we all constantly hear about any bad pastor in the nation. We all take a hit for that because it makes national news, and that's impacting all of us because you can't get away from it. Back in the day, if you were just a good, faithful servant in your congregation, your reputation was important. Now we all pay for the reputation of a bunch of jokers that ruin it for the rest of us because it makes headlines.
Well, Steve, you served as a pastor, and Wes and I currently are a pastor. I'd kind of like to hear from someone who's never, at least I don't think, has ever been a pastor. Antoine?
Don't tell my grandmother that.
She's out there. What do you think of what we've been talking about?
No, pastor without the collar. No, the challenge, and I won't lay it at the feet of pastors because I think that's and it's probably where Steve is getting to with his magazine, is that pastors probably share an undue burden for the troubles that the church is going through right now. There's a piece of that might be how pastors sell the gospel message, as you guys were talking about in the Y2K stories and similar. But one of the things that in the African American and Latino churches that I've recently had some conversations around, we've talked a lot more about personal accountability and how our churches have been unable to get at us at that level, to teach us how to take accountability for our actions, accountability for the things that we say, so that a regional story or a national story doesn't rock us so much to the core that we change our direction, so that the influences of Facebook changing privacy settings doesn't cause us to call a city council and create legislation. We just had last night a story break here in Charlotte of a middle school and a high school. They found about 70 some odd students passing pictures of nude kids. The kids were passing pictures of nude classmates around, and one of the persons that made the statement was like, "I don't believe that God would allow our kids to go through this." And I can totally imagine Sunday service in those communities are going to be the pastors and those churches having to respond to a question of personal accountability, but not also taking on the weight of what that news cycle has generated around it. So it's not one side that's the problem. Not one side fixes all. But I do think, at least overall, that in some way, shape, or form, our pastors of our various churches need to have help to understand what is theirs to take on and what is theirs for their community to take on, so that that kind of news gen, that mainstream news story that is loud, doesn't become the weight that the rest of the community carries, and that then therefore drags down that community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we're we struggle in a world in that the church is filled mostly with very conservative people, and by nature conservative people don't want things to change, and that's really what we're talking about. You said the bowling alleys and other things are down, and it's because they're probably or the bowling alleys are changing and succeeding, but things like the Kiwanis Club or whatever are down because they're probably not willing to change. And my father-in-law goes to the American Foreign Legion post, and they're all over 65 years old and sit around talking about why we can't get any young people anymore, and then they do stuff that young people don't have any interest in, and we do the same thing. My church has probably more young people than most small churches of our size, but most of them are here because they're loyal and faithful to older members. Grandmother's here, or grandmother used to be here and they can't imagine leaving because of the memories of her. And so it's, we have to deal with it, and church life is one of those things that is going to require change, and we're going to have to reach the population. I mean, I guess we could talk about this all afternoon if we, or all morning long if we let ourselves. You know, you brought up the church management software. We said we'd mention that just briefly. Just talk to me about, you know, Christian Computing Magazine has always maybe been at the forefront of helping people see and understand what this is, and what's the value in having this. We're showing the church management software feature chart that we have over at CCMag. First, what is this, and then, you know, give us just we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but
sure.
What's the value in it? Why should a church consider using it, or maybe why they shouldn't going forward?
I think most churches do use church management software of some sort, because there's church management software that you could buy for $99 that, you know, you don't have to pay a monthly fee or anything like that. You can get started with it. Then you got church management software that's a huge expense, because some big churches have 100 staff members, full-time administrator. Some churches are so big that they have their own programming staff on staff to be able to, you know, constantly tweak something like the high end of, you know, a Shelby or an ACS. Basically, the idea was originally started with, okay, we need to keep track of our members. By law, we're required to keep track of their contributions, so you'd have a contribution program, use a computer to keep track of that. And then the other thing was, okay, we need to zip code sort our you know, labels when we're sending out letters and stuff. That's how it started as well. It was church management software, administration software. Now, what it's evolved to now is the smart companies. It's evolved not for the church staff, but for the whole church. So you have great, like Church Community Builder. Everybody's allowed to log into their own site, change their phone number, change their address, decide what other members are going to see, what the other members can't see. And it starts allowing your volunteer leadership to connect with their small groups using the church's management software program. So they don't have to have their own Facebook group. They don't have to have their own Yahoo group or whatever. They can actually log into the community. You know, ACS has got the city, which is actually a total app for this. So it was eventually designed by Mars Hill and then sold to Zondervan. ACS picked it up. It's considered church management, but it actually works with any church management software program. It keeps track of all that membership data. A lot of churches are also now wanting to do check-in. That's where Fellowship Tech started. And Fellowship as a church down in Texas did a really great job of saying, you know what, people keep coming, but every time they come, then they're going out your back door and you're not tracking it. So how do we know if a lady came 3 weeks and then never came again? How do we do follow-up? So they started actually every door you checked in. They had a way of quickly doing that using kiosks and stuff. So even a large church, where a small church, you know, small church, somebody walks in that's new as a membership, you know they're new. But these large churches couldn't keep track. So it was designed to close the back door. So, you know, in 3 weeks you attend, or 3 months you attend, all of a sudden you quit attending, the church management software program would flag you and let you know, hey, this person's no longer attending, or this person was a regular giver, now they're no longer giving. So maybe there's something going on there. And allowed the ministry staff to, you know, connect. So it's a very large variety of what it does. Now, we just did a survey just 2 days ago. We've got a couple hundred responses so far. We asked our readership in CCMag, are you happy with your church management software? And 60% said yes, they were. 40% said no. And the number one reasons, I'm looking at the chart, it's too complicated or outdated to use. That was 35% of those that weren't satisfied. The second, it doesn't have the features we now need or want. I'm going to address that in the magazine, because most church management churches buy it, and then they get a new staff member comes in, or they have multiple staff members. They don't go to the training, and they don't even know the features. I spoke a year ago last January, actually, in the Kansas City Church Administration. I was talking about the importance of text messaging, and a guy saw me afterwards and said, okay, I'm the church administrator for this church in KC. We'd like to do text messaging. I said, okay, what church management software program do you use? He mentioned the one he used. That allowed for texting. He was going to change church management software programs to get one that allowed him to text his members, and didn't realize that the one he had that ability. So there's a lot of problems, you know, with churches that, you know, they're switching around. They need to probably figure out the programs, the features that they already have. But that's a large source of our sponsorship in Christian Computing Magazine. So they're the ones that provide the magazine to 35,000 readers for free every month. So we're we're appreciative of what they do. And then we try to cover other stuff like, Kevin, you do Bible study software, and those guys are all dependent on the internet for marketing now. I mean, there was a day that Logos would have run 2 full-page ads back in CCMag in the 90s, but now they, of course, market to their own people and use the internet for marketing. That's changed a lot of publications.
Mm-hmm.
So, Steve, this is a content management question. I do an ungodly amount of SharePoint training. Ungodly. That's been my week this week. One of the things that I deal with when I'm consulting with these groups or doing trainings, a lot of the organizations I deal with, while they understand some of the features of the software that they're working with, whether it's SharePoint or some other CMS that they're working with, a lot of times they don't understand why that software or why they even need to manage their content to begin with. Have you found over the course of years of just keeping this database, speaking to the different organizations that are building this, that it may not just be a technical gap, but it's actually maybe a goals gap, a strategy gap when it comes to why they need to track or what it is that they need to catalog and understand about their member source?
Yeah, a lot of them don't really get it. They don't see the value of the information they have, and therefore they don't get good information in the database in the first place. I was at a church where they were wanting to start a singles ministry. They ran 3,000 people on a Sunday, and so they went to their church management, to say, okay, how many singles do we actually have here between this age and that age? And they ended up with about 1,500, and they knew that wasn't true. But they had people, no one had been keeping the data updated. So I was actually visiting that church and attending at the time, and they had me in their database 3 times, under Steve, Stephen, and then a different spelling of Stephen. And, so if they're not really doing the content, if they're not putting good data in, it's good data out. It's bad data out. So, yeah, a lot of them don't realize the value. Some really do, and they use their church management to really do a good job as far as closing that back door. And then, I went to a large Methodist church in Houston, and they had used fellowship tech, and they had invested a fortune in all these kiosks, and then, but the pastor wasn't really into it, and there wasn't a big push, and so they wanted to know what to do with all these kiosks because they had no volunteers to stand at the door and check people in. They'd put all this investment in it, and, it was being wasted. I see a lot of that, too. It takes really coordinated
a lot of cart
staff
before the horse.
Really connect staff. Yeah.
Well, I don't use it at our churches because we don't have the staff. I don't have a secretary. I don't have time to do all that kind of thing, and the expense of it in a smaller church with a tight budget like that. And so, what about a church like 90% of what is it? I've heard that 90% of pastors pastor a church of 90 or less, or something like that. I can't remember what the figure was, but what do groups like that do for church management? I know, Wes, you made your own because you've got programming skills.
Well, yeah, I'm in the process of it, but yeah, I'm using FileMaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Steve, what do you think? What do smaller groups like us? How do we get the advantage of this tracking information that'll help us keep up with people in a systematic way, but at the same time, maybe don't feel like. Or maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe there is something out there that we could use that would be simple and inexpensive. Or
there's some really good simple ones for the smaller churches, like Power Church has something, and I know Church Windows has a very beginner starter program. And as a matter of fact, most of them have a system. Your church management's based upon the size of your church, the congregational size. So something that a church of 3,000 or 15,000 would be using, a very small church could be using because they're only paying $15 a month to use it because, it's designed on their membership. Now, how much data and how much time is involved. The reason I started Christian Computing Magazine in 1989 was because I had a color computer. When I saw as a value as out of college when the computers first started becoming available for the home, I saw the value. I typed in all of my illustrations, and cataloged them, and when mapping programs came out, I mapped all my memberships, so the next guy would be able to find these people's homes and stuff. And so I've always seen the value of it. That's how I got started in the magazine in the first place. So it's a matter of priorities and what you want to do with it, because there's so much. Most of these church management software programs offer so much, and churches take advantage of just the parts that they want. One of the advantages we've always said of not programming your own is most of these have a huge history. They got 20 years of listening to different congregations that say, I need my report to look this way, or now I need it to do this. And so when you start on your own, the disadvantage is like if Wes leaves that church, the next guy's going to go, what is this? How do I use it? What do I do? Where do I go for support? But a lot of churches do that. There's a lot of churches still that do their own, just a database, and keep track of their membership and use something to keep track of contributions. And for most churches that have church management software, they haven't even scratched the surface of what the program could really do for them.
Is there any data or anything that shows that this stuff helps with, attendance, growth, financial, health in the church?
Yeah, there actually is in some cases. For example, contributions. If you send out a quarterly statement instead of a yearly statement, I think you see like a 7 to 10% increase in giving. Simply because it reminds people, okay, I forgot to give during the summer. I was gone 3 weeks. And so, but it's a lot of pain to get out your yearly statements if you can do a quarterly statement. So if you keep the data going, for example, as you're doing it, it's very easy to send a quarterly statement. There was one, MyFlock, that actually every member of the church could log in, and once they logged in using username and password, they saw a customized version of the church management software, including their giving graph. It was right there. So they could see that, okay, look, yeah, I was doing pretty good, then I dropped down here, I was gone for 4 weeks during the summer. We never really made that up. The church really took a hit, obviously, for me because I wasn't there. So, yeah, there's some statistics. Online giving is now being offered, where people can actually give through their apps or give through their iPad or give on the website and actually set up reoccurring payments. There's a lot of evidence to show that works better for finances. Obviously, the membership doesn't work at all unless you're keeping track of attendance and somebody's doing follow-up when someone disappears. I mean, you can keep all that data, but if you're not doing anything with it, if all of a sudden somebody quits coming and it flags you and says, hey, this person quit coming, you don't do the follow-up. It's not the software's problem.
And for those who don't know, this stuff will, you can set it up to spit out automatic reports of those things like, the Jones family hasn't been here in 2 weeks. You better call them. Or Bill Smith has quit giving over the last 3 weeks. Maybe that he's got a financial problem. They don't say the second part of it, but they automatically spit out this data if you set it up to. Is that right?
Yeah. And, someone's finance dropping is not like, well, I want to get out there because I want to get their money. You might find they have a big health issue. They lost their job. They're going through a divorce. That all of a sudden a drop of a giver who's no longer giving is a sign there's something going wrong in the family. You don't go out to try to get their money, but you go out to see if everything's okay. So it can help in a lot of those ways.
As pastors, we see money as two sides. It's the nuts and bolts of how we do our church, but it's also a spiritual issue. Jesus talked about money more than he talked about heaven in the Gospels, and so we have to be concerned. That's discipleship and teaching people how to use their money. A lot of us shy away from it, because the pastor, all he talks about is money, and it's like, well, money's one of the most important issues of discipleship today, and if you don't talk about money, you're probably, it's because you're a coward or you're not good with it yourself, and so dealing with someone who's got a financial issue, that's a spiritual issue more than almost anything else, probably.
And church management software can help you in your communications. And all these things in 27 years, I push. I decide, hey, this is where we need to be, and I contact the Shelbys and the ACS and the church windows. I push you at their conferences, and eventually, a couple of years later, we see it. One of the things we want, I push the Have It Your Way, the Burger King church management software. We need to quit saying that we're going to communicate to you this way. We're going to send you a letter, or we're going to send you an email. When you buy an Adobe product years ago, when you got done buying the Adobe product, you said, we'd like to inform you of updates. How would you like for us to do that? And you had a choice: text me, email me, mail me, phone me. That's the way churches should be. And so a lot of church management software does that. You got a message to get out. Your members have said, this is how I want to get the information from the church. So you send that message out. It'll print 13 letters. It'll send 22 emails. And it'll, tell you need to call these 5 people. I mean, it helps in facilitating communication. And I'm a big believer in texting. I really think texting is the best way to communicate. We know that, in fact, church management, it's interesting, church management software started by helping you to get your labels all so you can get your nonprofit discount. You don't have the post office. And so we got meters and we got labels. We know that those letters, like everything else, doesn't get opened anymore. I'm actually telling churches now, even large churches, if you really want communications to get out, give volunteers, sit around your church newsletter, whatever you want, and have them hand address those envelopes and put a stamp on it, even though it costs you more. Why? It doesn't save anything. We saved 15% on our letters. If nobody reads it, you didn't save anything. You just spent a lot of money on paper and postage meters and labels.
And labor.
There's a lot of. I didn't get that.
Yeah, I said and labor to get the thing out, because those things are very labor intensive.
Oh yeah.
Well, all of this has led me to. Go ahead.
I was going to say church management with texting, like church community building, a lot of them allow you to text people. Back to the reason the church is dying, it's personal. We're in a personal communication age. So anything that was dependent on come and sit for an hour, listen to me talk, and then stand, I'm going to close in prayer and leave and not have the opportunity to ask a question or comments. That's why blogs have comments. YouTube videos have comments. People want to be able to comment and connect. Texting is seen as a personal communication. Letters are not, phone calls are not. When you get a text, even if you know that text went to everybody in the choir to remind them that it's time for choir or that you're coming in the back door because, it still is perceived as personal. And so that's huge. And seeing that we're about out of time, I'll give you a couple ideas churches are doing that are still doing traditional worship, but are doing personal communication. It's making a huge difference. I know of a bunch of churches around here, Southern Baptist, traditional churches. They have simply switched their Sunday school time and their worship time. And the reason they've done this, you have worship first, the pastor can preach, and then there's a special. Everybody breaks the old Sunday school classes. He has a special class just where you can ask questions and discuss the topic of the sermon. Oh, that's huge. It's huge in the way they prepare their sermons. Pastors told me that after a while, they're actually sort of redesigning their sermons. So they put out rhetorical questions, and they're looking forward to that discussion and tweaking people's thought patterns. Simply switching those and allowing people to hear the sermon instead of getting up and leaving, they get to then ask questions. And Adam Hamilton experimented with this at this United Methodist Church. He preached 4 services to 10,000 people, and he still did that. And after the first service, he went to a room. Hundreds of people would be there. He would take questions and answers for 30 minutes while they were doing the music. Then he would go right back in the pulpit and preach. Then he'd go right back and answer questions. And a really cool one I heard, I'll give kudos out for, whatever. My wife says, I say that wrong. First Baptist Church, Orlando, big church, traditional worship service. But they announced on the bulletin and their signs and on the overhead, they announced that there'll be 10 to 15 minutes afterwards. You can tweet in a question anytime during the service using a hashtag and ask any questions about the sermon, and the pastor will sit around for 10, 15 minutes afterwards and answer questions. Somebody takes those and hands them the cards at the end of the service. Hugely popular. I mean, people are absolutely loving it that you can go and ask questions. And it doesn't even have to be about the sermon. And, of course, they're selective on the questions that make it to the pastor to answer. But it's turned out to be a really cool. People go because, hey, not only does he preach to me, I get to ask questions.
Yeah, I've heard of some of that, the idea of using social media for question and answer after a service. And that's potentially pretty cool. Also, a couple of weeks ago, we had someone who was an education expert on from my community here, and we talked a little bit about flipping education. And as you were talking about switching the Sunday school and the worship, I thought about that. I said, what if in some of these smaller churches that have the advantage of being small so that we could still do public discussion time, what if a pastor preached his sermon on YouTube and then tweeted out the thing or emailed it or whatever, and people watched it, and then they got together and discussed the sermon.
Yeah. Some pastors, and I've been encouraging some pastors, record your sermon live, and before anybody goes to dinner, somebody needs to put that up on Facebook, simply because even the members of the church who were there can then go and ask questions. So you can say at the end of the service, so listen, watch for this sermon on our church's Facebook page, and if you have any questions or comments or thoughts, be sure to list them there. That's all you've done, and you've already opened the door to personal communication versus this is just I'll tell you something really weird. This is a true example. Sociologists discovered it. I'm going to take it totally out of the church content. I'm the best dentist in the world, and I'm teaching a conference on why you should floss more. And we sell $50 tickets, and 1,000 people show up. Okay? Let's say I have 10% of the audience that decides to floss more after all 1,000 people came. If I take that same message on why you should floss more and make it available as a podcast, and once the same number of people have listened to it that was actually at the live event, the response would be 20%. So actually, we get a better response from our sermons if we didn't invite them to church at all, if everybody listened at home. And the reason is a podcast is considered personal communication because I'm going to listen to it when I want to and where I want to. I'm going to listen to it on my way to work. I'm going to listen. And I'm no longer thinking the audience he's talking to. I'm listening to that person and he's talking to me. It just changes everything. And so the impact is double what it should be versus, sitting in an audience. That totally blows our mind about the way we do worship service.
Mm-hmm. So, Steve, let me ask you this question, because I'm just thinking, reflecting on our whole conversation here, and even probably some of the pre-conversation. Would you say that some of the reason, or maybe even a glaring reason, that we're seeing a decline in church membership or small group membership is because we've for so long have been a broadcast, a we culture, and people are just asking, please just talk to me. The effectiveness of Jesus's ministry wasn't necessarily that he did the Sermon on the Mount, but that he stopped before and afterwards to talk with individuals. Mm-hmm. So would you say that the technologies and the behaviors that we are espousing that churches do, they promote a church culture that's a me culture? You spoke to me versus you spoke to we, and that's kind of the focus. That's where maybe the church is probably losing its old legs and trying to gain some new ones.
Yes, and the fact that it's one-way communication. Everybody wants two-way now. Look at the news. They don't care about an expert. We don't study this out and present you the news at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. We push news at you all day long, and it's the man in the street. What did the man in the street say? What did the man in the street think? We care more about that. Talk radio is up because people, when somebody calls, they may never call a talk radio show, but other people are calling and asking questions. That's huge. Bill O'Reilly now allows emails and spends the last 10 minutes of his show. This is what my listeners want to say to me. And you'll listen because you get an opportunity. You feel like it's a two-way conversation. The more we make it a one-way conversation, the more we're going to continue to lose.
And I think the reality is with the whole two-way conversation, especially when you're talking about broadcast media like the news and things like that, is you're finding that the illusion of a two-way conversation is extremely powerful.
Yeah.
But see, this is where I sometimes caution us, because again, the idea of a short-term gain versus the long play, and so we have to be very careful about how we go about doing this, to where we're not just creating the illusion of a personal communication. We're actually trying to create that two-way street. This is my great critique of the megachurch movement and how we have the app and do all that, and I understand that. But the reality is that connection is still very institutional. It's still very illusory in that personal connection between congregation and what's going on in the wider body. And this is a great struggle that we're going to have to face.
Yeah, the mega churches can only really minister and survive if they really have small groups and push it. You have to have somebody ask you, what's happened in your last week, and you got to be able to say, I just got diagnosed with cancer to somebody, and have some people pray for you. You have to have that small group connection. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
A lot of the churches that are successful are doing that well.
Mm-hmm.
Others are not.
Listen, I think this has been maybe one of our more interesting discussions today, and I think that is largely due to our guest, Steve. We appreciate you being here. You are a wealth of information and knowledge, and I love the fact that we had Santa Claus on our podcast today. That's my wife sees your picture on Facebook or on whatever when I see it, and she says that guy looks like Santa Claus.
I had a beard way down here, but I had to shave it because of some important business meetings I had last October.
Kevin, you started the podcast saying it was nice not to see Antoine, and now you're calling Steve Santa Claus. So you're having a bad week, or what's going on there?
Well, I just think you're plain ugly, and you need to shut up. No, I'm kidding. I haven't had a bad week. Sorry for being so insulting. I'll be able to please forgive me. We've had a great time, and Steve, you're always welcome back. I'd love to have you back sometime again, and we can discuss some of these issues if you're willing. Antoine, thanks for coming and being a part of us, and of course, Wes, we really appreciate you chiming in with us, and we, as always, do this every Friday morning at 9 o'clock. We actually had a few viewers, live viewers. Most people, I think, consume this by watching it on YouTube, but you can listen to it. We'll make it available on iTunes and Stitcher Radio, as well as over at Theotek.com. And I hope that you'll go over. We don't always publicize our personal stuff, but I have rebirthed my personal website, kevinpurcell.org. No longer points to Google+. And just today I put a post up about what preachers can learn from the Brian Williams debacle. And I hope that you'll go check that out and share it and let other people know. But subscribe to us if you're watching us on YouTube so that you'll be notified every time this. And yes, put comments down there. We would love to hear from you and what you think. Do you think that does your church need church management software? Do you think that the whole internet thing where people are hacking everybody, what can the church do to be a part of the solution instead of a problem there? So we'd love to hear from you more on that. Guys, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
All right. We appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, Steve.
All right.